The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series Doctor Who. Today we're discussing The Vanquishers, the last chapter in the latest season of Doctor Who, featuring the 13th Doctor. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going, Dom?
Very well, thanks. And Jimmy Akin. Howdy, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, be sure to join the StarQuest fan club by texting StarQuest to 66866. That's StarQuest, one word, to 66866. I also want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest network that you will definitely enjoy if you like Secrets of Doctor Who, and that is Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. This is, of course, featuring our very own Jimmy Akin, who explores all kinds of mysteries, both natural and supernatural. And just to give you a preview of some things coming up, this is, as we release this episode, Pearl Harbor is this week, the anniversary, 80th anniversary. We're going to be talking about Pearl Harbor. We've got some great shows coming up featuring...
And was there a conspiracy?
Yes, of course. That's the mystery. I think we're going to be doing something on the Hindenburg next month in January.
Yeah, so things we have coming up, we've got Pearl Harbor. We have the involvement of a Soviet mole leading to Pearl Harbor. We've got questions for the holidays. Then we have Is It Always Demons in January, as well as the Hindenburg. And interview with Major Bill Ray, who is one of the Stargate remote viewers, including some of his most dramatic remote viewing experiences involving things like a mass alien abduction, Roswell, and the Ark of the Covenant.
Wow.
And all kinds of additional stuff, poltergeists, inflation, lots of different things.
Definitely want to subscribe and stay subscribed, because 2022 is going to be the best year yet for the Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found, or at sqpn.com/mysterious. So we do have some listener feedback this episode, but because...
Wait, listener feedback at the beginning? How timey-wimey.
I know, it is very timey-wimey. It almost splits me into three trying to do this. But I want to do it at the top of the show because it sort of will be spoiled if we do it after we've discussed the show, because it's the predicting how things are going to turn out. So I want to share this. I don't do this to shame, because frankly, I was in the same boat as these guys with my predictions. So let me just read them to you. First, from Ted on Facebook. Wow, there's a lot to resolve in the 6th episode, and by the time the next podcast comes, a lot of our questions will be answered. There's been much discussion about the Master showing up, and my guess at this point is that the Master is Voldemort. I mean, Prentice. I realized this at the end of Survivors of the Flux, when it was revealed that Prentice was working with the Centaurans. Who else would team up with the Doctor's enemies, and his plan, as badly thought out as it will be exposed in the final episode. And then Rich, also on Facebook, wrote, I'm calling it right now. The Grand Serpent is the Master. Remember the 1996 Doctor Who movie? The Master was a snake. Well, technically a death worm morphant, but still. I have to admit, guys, I was in the same boat. I was certain that Prentice would be the Master as well.
Well,
was he?
There were they did certainly establish similarities between the Grand Serpent and the Master. That would be a very reasonable interpretation going in. And I guess we'll have to find out what happened.
That's right.
And I will give a spoiler. There was a mention of the Master, but where, in what context?
Oh, that's a good. Make sure to bring that back up again, Father Cory, because I don't remember that one. So
it's in my outline.
Oh, okay. Good. Don't forget to tell me. All right. Well, so let's get to it. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of this episode?
Okay. Spoilers ahoy. So here we go. Stuff happens. The Doctor wins. The end.
That's very spoilery.
Yeah. Well, if you want a little more detail, I mean, this one was tough to summarize because of how dense it is in terms of everything that's going on. But here we go. Last time on Doctor Who, Swarm disintegrated Tecteun and then turned to deal with the Doctor, giving us our latest cliffhanger. This time, the Doctor ducks out of the way of his disintegrator hand and runs to get help from the Ood. The Ood tells her that if she takes off her stabilizer, she'll be pulled back into the universe. He locates her TARDIS for her, so she'll be pulled back there, but instead, the Doctor is split across 3 different places. One of her is still on board Division Headquarters with Swarm and Azure. One of her goes to the Joseph Williamson tunnels, and one of her goes to Carvinista's ship, where he and Bell are. On board Division Headquarters, Swarm and Azure reveal their plan. They want to use the Flux, which turns out to be based on an antimatter wave, to destroy the material universe, ending with Atropos, where their god, which is the personification of time, is imprisoned. They want to take the Doctor there and offer her as a sacrifice to time. They then plan to indulge themselves by rewinding the universe, rewinding history, recreating the universe, and destroying it over and over again multiple times. They plan to make the Doctor experience this over and over in a destructive loop as revenge for making them suffer for such a long period. They also give her a glimpse inside the pocket watch that holds her memories, and she sees the crooked house again, which is a representation containing all her past selves and memories. Meanwhile, the Doctor in the Williamson tunnels reunites with Yaz, Dan, Professor Jericho, the TARDIS, and Kate Stewart, who is leading human resistance to Sontaran occupation. We learn that Williamson built his tunnels because he had multiple rips in space and time on his property, saw the future coming of the Flux, and built the tunnels as underground protection. Eventually, he is sent back to his own time through one of the doorways. They also pick up Claire in 1967 using the TARDIS. Meanwhile, inside the passenger form, Vinder and Diane discover a way to escape and alert the Doctor to where the passenger form is being stored. Eventually, the Doctor with Carvanista and Bell also unites with them, and they rescue Vinder and Diane, so we gradually get the whole team back together. And they split up on submissions to deal with all the crises. It turns out that the Sontarans have been desperately searching for the coordinates of the final Flux event. They've offered the Daleks and Cybermen an alliance to ensure their mutual survival. The Sontarans also have killed all of the Lupari and taken their ships, which are able to resist the Flux. And they're able to get the coordinates of the final Flux event using psychic abilities from Claire and Professor Jericho. They then lure the Daleks and Cybermen into a trap, at first protecting them with the Lupari shield, but then leaving them exposed to the Flux. The Doctors realize that this has been their plan all along, and that they plan to stop the antimatter flux by feeding them the Dalek and Cyber armies, which are made of matter. However, the Doctor, who has no compunction about the resulting megadeaths, disables the Sontaran fleet so it also is eaten by the Flux. Most genocide-y Doctor ever. During the process, Professor Jericho dies, and then the Doctor uses the now empty passenger form to absorb the remainder of the Flux. Meanwhile, Swarm and Azure take the Doctor to Atropos, where the personification of time is unhappy that it isn't being released because of the failure of the Flux. Time then apparently disintegrates Swarm and Azure. Time also warns the Doctor that her current incarnation is coming to a close, and hints that her next regeneration will involve the Master. In the end, Carvanista, Bell, and Vinder go off together on Carvanista's ship to have Big Finish adventures together and possibly come back in one of next year's specials. The Grand Serpent is exiled to a tiny distant asteroid. Dan officially joins Team TARDIS, and the Doctor asks the TARDIS to hide the pocket watch with her memories until she really, really asks for it back. The end.
Mm-hmm. My big regret is actually the loss of Professor Jericho. That was the one I wanted to see his continuing adventures.
Yeah, everybody loved Professor Jericho, and for once they killed a character that they had actually built up some investment in.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So, all right, let's jump right in. And that's what they did with this episode, is that it really took off from the recap. Like, they didn't even say, here's the recap, and now we take off from here. It's like it's literally continued the same scene where the Doctor was with Swarm and Azure.
As you're watching the recap, the word, which is very brief, the word "now" just appears on the screen to signal the transition into now.
Right.
So I'd like to talk about a kind of meta issue.
Okay.
For this, or maybe more than one, but so this story has what you could think of as the Moriarty problem. Mm-hmm. Now, people may be aware that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle at a certain point got tired of writing the Sherlock Holmes character. So he killed him off. And he killed him off in a story called The Final Problem, in which he introduced the supervillain Moriarty, who is like Sherlock Holmes's nemesis, is equal and opposite. And they end up falling from a great height at the Reichenbach Falls in Switzerland, and both dying. And Dr. Watson is then left to write the story of what happened. But then Sherlock Holmes proved too popular to be killed off. And so Conan Doyle pulled a timey-wimey move of his own by writing The Hound of the Baskervilles, which is a novel set before the Reichenbach Falls incident. So he goes back in time. But eventually he gave up with the timey-wimey stuff and just said Holmes had faked his death and brought him back. Now, this is a pivotal story in Sherlock Holmes, and I am of the opinion, which I've expressed before, that I think it's very badly written. Not in the sense that the prose is bad, but that the structure of the story is bad, because you have this sudden introduction of Moriarty, the nemesis of Sherlock Holmes, because you want him to die, you want him to have this big send-off, so he needs a big villain. So you create his equal and opposite, who has never been mentioned before. Yeah. And Holmes is like introducing the concept of Moriarty to Watson at the beginning of the story. It's like, here's this major guy who's responsible for all the crime in London, that despite the fact you and I have been working together for years and I've been secretly tracking this guy, I've never mentioned him to you before, my best friend Watson. Which just makes no sense. And so what they're trying to do is build up investment in this major big bad out of nothing right before the fight. And that's bad structure. The thing to do would have been to plant seeds of Moriarty way before and gradually build up to this, at least over a few stories. And Conan Doyle didn't do that. And he, even after he brings Sherlock Holmes back, he tries to retcon it that Holmes has been talking to Watson about Moriarty the whole time. Which is patently not true, because he introduces him to Moriarty for the first time in The Final Problem. Right. So this series, this Flux, presents us with something like that, because we have the introduction of Swarm, who presents himself as the Doctor's nemesis from the dark times. They fought so many times. He was always her big bad. Like the Master in her current set of memories, he was the proto-master. He was her best frenemy. And so he needs to be built up as this big threat. And I think this is more successful than The Final Problem, because it's not just one episode. If they tried to do it in one episode like The Final Problem, it would have fallen flat. But they actually had 6 episodes here to build up Swarm as this very sinister figure from the past. We get to know him a little bit. We get to see what he can do. It is indeed terrifying. I mean, if someone really had those abilities, wow, that would be terrifying. And so I think it's more successful than that. I also, since time disintegrated him, time can bring him back. And so I thought this series did a fairly good job of introducing villains for the future, because, lots of villains show up and they die or something like that, and then they get brought back. But they've given us They've given us Swarm and Azure as interesting characters from the Dark Times. They can be brought back in the future. Also, they've got the Grand Serpent marooned on that asteroid now, and he can be brought back in the future. I mean, he's not even dead. He's just marooned. So, so I thought this was a decent introduction of compelling villains that I would like to see again in the future. And I thought it worked well on that score. I also like getting a little bit more information about the Dark Times. We've had a number of villains come back from them. Originally in Classic Who, there were the vampires. Then in New Who, we got the Weeping Angels, the Rachnos, and in the animated version, we got the Nestine, turned out to be from the Dark Times, and now we have the Ravagers, Swarm and Azure, as well. And so I like that they're gradually giving us a little bit more information. We also know how the Dark Times ended with the imprisonment of Time.
So speaking of Time, Time, this character Time, is not introduced here for the first time. Sorry, I didn't mean that. But in fact, it was introduced as an eternal, like death and pain, was introduced in novels, apparently. That's what I was reading. Yeah,
there have been personifications of Time before, mostly in spin-off material. I don't know that we have met the Eternals before on screen, but I don't believe Time was one of them.
No.
I personally am to me, what happens in novels is sort of beta canon.
Yeah.
Unless it's directly and unambiguously said on the show that, that happened. I don't treat novels the same way as I do as media that actually involve the actors from the show,
like Big Finish. Yeah.
Well, and that's clearly how, at least since Moffat's time, they've been treating spin-off media. Big Finish is really being brought into canon strongly, but the novels are really not mentioned very often, as far as I know. Going back to your conversation, Jimmy, about the Moriarty Problem. That was a risk that I think they took, and I hope they took, knowing it was a problem when they brought in the whole Timeless Child thing, because now we've got this whole backstory we know nothing about. We know nobody that's there, and even the Doctor herself doesn't know that these characters are there. And I think I agree with you. They did a good job with Swarm and Azure of bringing them in a way that they were always there. They're always in the background. We just didn't know about them until now. You know.
Yeah,
and I think they didn't present them as like, as I've been telling all my companions over the last 13 regenerations, these figures are there, but we've never heard about them. It's more like no one knew about them except these figures themselves. So I think they did a good job of setting them up in a way that they're like, oh yeah, we've always been kind of lurking in your background.
Yeah, I mean, after 55 years of Doctor Who, a lot of mystery gets dispelled, gets opened up. The doors get open. We find out more and more about the Doctor. There's still mystery there, but the fact that I think all of this, Timeless Child and all this stuff about the Division, really re-imbues the Doctor with mystery that can be explored for another 50 years, frankly.
And that's why I'm fundamentally in favor of it. I mean, I would criticize details of execution, but fundamentally I'm in favor of reintroducing that element of mystery. So I don't have a problem with the Division or the missing memories or the Dark Time. I'm so glad they did not give the Doctor back all of her memories in this episode.
Yeah.
I'm even a little hinky about she's got them and they're in the TARDIS. I would rather have destroyed the watch because it was being held by Azure as she was being disintegrated, and she dropped it and the Doctor picked it up. They could have just had the watch disintegrated with Azure, and that would have been a tragic loss for this episode. And then the Doctor would have had to find some other way to learn what happened to her.
Yeah.
And that would be more piecemeal, and they could dispel the mysteries gradually. If they bring, and whenever they bring back the pocket watch, the temptation will be to let her have everything.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't let her have everything. She should be as much of a mystery to herself as she is to the viewer, substantially anyway. And she should only get her memories back piecemeal. So what I would do if I were writing this in the future is something similar to what they actually did in this episode. They didn't just give her the memories back when they opened the watch. She saw the crooked house And that was a representation of the mysteries, but she needed to take a further step in order to get them. And I would have some similar thing where the watch can't give her everything all at once. She can only get a piece of it, and doesn't simply learn everything all at once.
I was telling myself that the hatch that she dropped it down in was called the Russell T Davies hatch. That's for Russell T Davies to explore. Here you go, RTD. This is yours.
Now, one thing I'd like to see is not use the pocket watch for the memories. Just forget about it.
Yeah.
Let it be one of those things in Doctor Who that just kind of gets forgotten about. Now, of course, as you like to say, this is Chekhov's pocket watch. They got to bring it back someday.
Yeah.
But this is be a place where Dr. Ruth could come in, where she helps, the current Doctor, 13th Doctor, 14th Doctor recover memories.
Or another incarnation.
Do it that way, another timeless child reincarnation. And I think that would frankly be a little more satisfying of a way to do it than let's do a brain dump of all your memories with the pocket watch.
Yeah.
Now I don't rule it out that Chris Chibnall may bring back the pocket watch in the specials, especially the final one, but I'm betting he won't, and I hope he won't. One other thing we learned in this episode about the Dark Times is that Carvanista was the Doctor's companion. And so I love that. I love having an on-screen, visually non-human companion.
Yeah.
Because we've had non-human companions before on screen. I mean, Canine, if you want to count robots, also Chameleon, but that was a failure as a companion.
Oh, that was terrible. Yeah.
But in terms of a biological alien that doesn't look human, like Turlo was alien, Nyssa was alien, Adric was alien, but they all looked human. Right. Having one that looks like a giant dog is great.
Yeah.
And we've had that kind of thing before in the comic books and the novels and Big Finish. For example, there's a companion of the 6th Doctor named Frobisher, who is a shape-shifting alien penguin. Most of the time looks like a penguin.
That is awesome. I want to listen to that.
But Frobisher's all across lots of media, so he's very popular.
That's awesome.
But having Carvanista is as a companion, and like other companions, he got left behind under circumstances we don't know. And he's got a thing in his head that will kill him if he tells the Doctor about their time in division together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big one. I really ended up liking Carvanista. I really, just that.
Oh yeah,
he's got an attitude, and I liked his attitude. He looks like a puppy dog. He looks cute and is not cute. I mean, he's sort of the Chewbacca thing. You know what I mean? Like Chewbacca looks cute, but
only
he's
able to
fierce.
talk human.
Yes, but exactly.
Yeah, Carvanista was one of the big success. I mean, Professor Jericho was a success. Carvanista was a big success, I think, in this series. I think the audience would love to see more Carvanista.
The only thing I hate about that is they've killed off his race.
Yeah.
And I really don't like that. I wish they would have left that, because that would have left them open to seeing more Lupari come in. And you've got a successful model here. Why not exploit it?
Yeah, I thought this was a point that I thought was unsuccessful. One of the things I complimented in a previous episode of this podcast was, for once, with the universe-ending plot, they're showing us the scale of it. Because we're not just hearing, lots of the universe is being destroyed, and we never see any of that happening. This time the scale feels big because we get to see the universe as it's being destroyed, and the wreckage of it afterwards. But Carvanista's family, they kill him off screen, and we only hear about it.
Yeah,
and you don't even see the ships blowing up. The ships are still there, and because they play the later plot.
Yeah, because they need them, and so they spaced everybody. They airlocked them all, and I thought that was unsatisfying. Also, technically, the I was popped out of the story by thinking about wolf communications when Carvanista howls, because he's enraged at that point. Wolves do not howl in rage.
Yeah,
they howl because they want to communicate. They howl to organize each other to get ready for a hunt, and they howl because they're lonely and they want contact. but they haven't set up Carvanista's emotional state that way, and he knows that he's not organizing for a hunt with other Lupari. So the howl actually popped me out of the story the way they use it. I love the howl. It's just like, well, this should be when he's feeling lonely, not enraged.
Right. And you can kind of see that just because he just found out that his race was dead. But at the same time, what do dogs do when they get mad? They growl. They bark.
They growl. They bark. If they're in pain, they scream or they whimper.
You know, I feel like it might have been more effective to have him just growl menacingly as they pan away, as they track away from him like that. I think that would have been more subtle, frankly. Doctor Who does not do subtle very often, but it would have been a nice subtle note. You know, one of the things, so the Lupari are dead. One of the things that we all kind of talked about, I don't know if we all agreed that it would be this way, but we brought it up, which is, well, in the 6th episode, the Doctor will snap her fingers, wave the sonic screwdriver, and everything will be reset back to normal. They left the universe broken. This is a broken universe, which I thought was interesting. Now, again, we're going to have to put a star on everything because specials into 2022. So who knows what's going to happen. We are clearly getting the Daleks back from destruction with the New Year's special called Eve of the Daleks. So that's happening. So, but as of this episode, as it ends, we have a broken universe, and that's interesting that they've done that.
Yeah.
And we may or may not see, it's entirely optional how much of that we see in the future, because they can always, if it's a story set in the past, well, the universe wasn't broken yet. Right. And if it's a story set in the present or the future, it's like, well, we're just in a part of the universe that wasn't affected.
Right. Exactly. But I do like that when they don't do the reset, that they leave things as they were.
Also, this is something, so I'll mention another literary parallel, this time to a graphic novel. It was originally a 4-part miniseries, but it's a graphic novel called Golden Age. And it is set in an alternate history of the DC universe, where it is really good. It's really, really well done. If you like graphic novels, get Golden Age. It is very well done. But they have a reveal of the big bad, and you have this emerging group of heroes in the 1950s. During the McCarthy era, heading up to 1960. So this is like 1959. And they have this group of heroes against a really powerful big bad. And one of the points they kind of make metatextually is that in a lot of comics, and this is true of other media as well, you tend to have sudden endings with big knockout punches. And where there's like some single thing that happens that allows good to win, as opposed to a death by 1,000 cuts, where you have to earn your way towards the victory a piece at a time. And that's what they do in Golden Age. There is no magic Superman who swings in and ends the big bad with one punch. The community of heroes has to take the big bad down a piece at a time. And this is essentially what we got in Flux, because there's no magic reset button at the end of it. Instead, they've got all these different crises, and they have to solve them one at a time.
Yeah.
And that is good writing. That is satisfying writing.
Yeah, I did like that. So a couple of ththings I want to mention. The Crooked House. I should have gone, rewound and looked at it, but the way I was watching it, I couldn't. I was in a hotel room with my kids. They were trying to sleep. But did the Crooked House? This is going to sound weird. Was it standing on chicken legs? Was it Baba Yaga's house?
No, I think it was just floating. It wasn't Baba Yaga's house.
Because that would have been cool. That would have been an interesting mystery. But the other thing it kind of called to mind.
For people who may not know, Baba Yaga is a character from Russian folklore who is a witch and lives in a house that walks on chicken legs.
Yes. My kids love that story. They're weird. But the other thing it brought to mind, speaking of Sherlock Holmes, was like the mansions of the mind, like the modern Holmes, the Benedict Cumberbatch Holmes. They had this whole episode, which was where Holmes was in, like, it had built
his mind palace.
Mind palace. Thank you. That's the word I couldn't get. Mind
Which
palace.
Is
and it
based
kind of
on
reminded me
real,
of that.
Yeah, it's based on real things, which are in the real world, they're called memory palaces. And they're used as a mnemonic technique to help you remember information. But on Sherlock, he uses it to perform other functions, like as kind of a mind laboratory to do deductive reasoning in, and also as a mental virtual environment to calm himself down when he there's an episode where he's been shot and he realizes if he doesn't get his heart rate down, he's going to bleed out. And so he goes into the mind palace and uses it to calm himself so he has a better chance of survival.
Right. So it did kind of recall for me a little bit like the idea of what would the doctor's memory palace look like? Well, a big crooked house probably is not bad or far off. So I like that. That was kind of interesting. And again, I hope to see that again.
And by the way, notice that so they kind of expanded Swarm's powers. And I don't know, they needed to better establish why he's called Swarm. I mean, they said, because he doesn't seem to be in control of a swarm. At least not obviously. Now, Azure, his sister, it's clear why she's called Azure, because she is Azure. Yeah. But Swarm, why is he called Swarm? The best I can make of it at this point is because he disintegrates people into a swarm of particles. And he also disintegrates the house into like a swarm of bits of lumber. But then it turns out in this episode, he can reverse it.
Yeah.
And it also turns out that he can do it just by waving his hand. He doesn't actually need to touch you. There is a moment where he just waves towards the doctor and she starts to disintegrate, and then he puts her back together to show what he's going to do to the universe. So, so he's extremely powerful.
Yeah. And
he can undo all the damage he's done. So he can bring back Tecteun, for example.
That's true. That's true. And then Williamson, it was fun to see the doctor meeting him. She was like fanboying with Williamson. Oh, you're on my list of people to see. I wanted to meet, in time. And the whole idea of,
I like how when she first sees him, she doesn't know who he is. And she's going, yes, Dan, TARDIS, Kate Stewart, Victorian looking guy.
That was good. And then his story of traveling through time as he goes through these rifts to time and places. And I'm like, Big Finish, paging Big Finish. Joseph Williamson's adventures in space and time. That would be interesting. I like that they have the Sontarans are raiding corner shops for junk food. That's like their big weakness. Nice. And the doctor uses that.
There was a really nice bit of dialogue there where the doctor is saying, okay, we've got these two human psychics who really want to help the Sontaran cause. And if you can you smuggle them in exchange for unlimited access to chocolate? You could even learn to make it yourself. And the Sontaran, who has chocolate smears all over his mouth from what he's just been eating, just pauses for a beat and says, chocolate. And you know that's his acceptance. And that was actually, for a silly scene, that was well done.
I like that. I like that.
Another bit of Sontaran, after they get Jericho and Claire smuggled in. So apparently you don't have to actually be a psychic. This is, everybody has residuals or limited psychic abilities that they can use. And then it turns out Claire, because she is a professional psychic, is able to get more, and she's actually able to give them the coordinates. But I like how they're plugging them into the machine to try to find the location of the final Flux event. The Sontaran is telling Jericho and Claire that your task will either end in success or death. And Jericho says, what is the reward for success? Death.
So, okay, I guess we'll succeed. Back in division between the universes, Azure points out the Doctor's greatest obsession is for others to live, and she's sort of more than to save herself. And Azure comes across as
her
confused.
greatest fear. So in recent incarnations of Doctor Who, they've portrayed like the Doctor as his own worst enemy.
Yeah,
especially in the wake of the Time War, he carried so much guilt for that. That's why we got the Dream Lord,
right?
Because of Matt Smith's Doctor's self-hatred. And we also had similar hints that the Doctor's his own biggest fear. But Azure says, no, I can see in your mind, and it's not yourself. You are not your own biggest fear. It's your fear of things being destroyed.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There's this exchange between Azure and the Doctor, where Azure's, why is what you fight for better than what we want? The Ravagers, Azure and Swarm, and she's saying this sort of in a philosophical way, like I don't understand you. And the Doctor talks about balance in the universe, and I was thinking, but without God or faith, is there a good answer for her to say what I want is better than what you want? Like the whole balance thing is kind of nonsense. It didn't really satisfy.
Yeah.
Creation versus uncontrolled time.
Yeah.
So there are things that could be said in this regard, but I found that it's like you've lived for more than 2,000 years and you haven't gotten around to taking a course in natural theology apologetics yet, really? Because these answers are lame.
Right. Right.
Oh, yeah.
Now, and it ultimately, because Chris Chibnall doesn't have the ability, apparently, to write at the needed level for this conversation, they end up, and this is itself an interesting choice, but they end up kicking it into the faith realm, where Azure says, well, okay, it's your faith that tells you the universe exists in balance for a reason, a balance between space and time. And that's your faith, and ours is different. Ours is true. and actually it's like, okay, points for that. She's at least she's not a complete relativist. She does have a different faith, and because it's her faith, she believes it's true. And so fine, that's has more intellectual integrity than, this is my faith, but I don't really know if it's true. I don't really believe it. Well, then how is it your faith? It's more like your guess. You haven't committed to it. So I would have liked more as, a philosopher, theologian, apologist. I would have liked more on all this, but adventure story stuff has to start blowing up again real quick.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm kind of surprised they even went there at all.
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm surprised that they even had that conversation at all. And it just, because it's like, well, we're in action mode here. This is all, we got to resolve the story. Why even waste the time?
Well, I think
slow it down.
I think it's a story writing thing. They have to take a breath in a story like this. You can't just go breakneck the entire time. And this was the breath they took.
They can, but
yeah, they can
sometimes do.
Yeah. Another thing, fun thing. Okay.
Also, it revealed in this conversation, it gave us a clearer statement of what Swarm and Azure's goals are.
Yeah.
Which is the destruction of all spatial objects, because they identify with time. They want time to exist, but they want all spatial objects to be destroyed.
Yeah.
Which includes themselves, as we see at the end.
Well, this whole space versus time, it's like, okay, guys, read some Einstein. They're not as separate as you're thinking.
Yeah, that's right. There was a fun moment. I feel like it was a Star Wars reference. So when the Doctor and Carvanista were in the cell on board the Sontaran ship, and the Grand Serpent comes in, the Doctor says, "You're a bit tall for a Sontaran, aren't you?"
Oh,
come on, that's going to be definitely a Star Wars.
You're a little short for a stormtrooper, aren't you?
Yeah. I had to laugh at that one because I felt sure that's what that was.
There was a lot of little funny bits. Like I like in the Sontaran, and the Sontarans in this have been really well played. They are scary for once in a way they usually are not, even back in Classic Who.
Yeah.
But simultaneously, they're comic, and Chibnall has really done well in using the Sontarans as actual threatening villains while simultaneously using them comedically. An example of that is in the initial broadcast that they make to make a peace offer to the Daleks and the Cybermen. The Sontaran commander is starting to talk, and he says, "People of the universe, we bring you hope. Except the Rutans. You Rutan scum have to be exterminated." Alluding to alluding to their long time war with the Rutans that goes all the way back to their introduction in Classic Who.
Yeah, that was great. We offer peace we offer hope to everyone except for you guys. We still hate you. That was awesome.
Yeah.
I like that Diane, Dan's love interest from the very beginning, she's very capable. When Vinder shows up inside the passenger form, she's been working. She understands, like, I found this thing that causes that to happen, and this is once she's got Vinder there, who knows a bit more about the technology, they can put it into action.
Because Vinder has a gun,
right?
That's what she's been missing. Her first line upon meeting Vinder is finally someone with a gun.
and she's the one who comes up with the solution to the flux. Put it inside the passenger form, and the doctor, like, good go and die. You figured it out. So I liked. She didn't get a lot to do in this season, but what she got to do was really nice. It was a little strange the ending though, which they had. When they were back in Liverpool, and Dan's like finally wants to get that drink with her, and she's like, no, I can't. And I get maybe she's traumatized, I guess.
Yeah. So they kind of play it as if she's blaming him for being late on the night they had a date, which he says it wasn't my fault because it wasn't. He was kidnapped by Carvanista. But twice they bring it up, like it seems like she's blaming him for that when she has no rational ground to. I think that really what they're communicating here is she's traumatized by recent events and isn't ready to re-engage socially yet. And that's why but she will be open to it in the future, which is why she says to Dan, well, not tomorrow night.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Yes. Okay. Yeah. She does say that. She ends with that.
I also like with Diane, so it being 2021, we've got to have representation all over the place.
Sure.
And you got to tick all these boxes on some checklist if you're Chris Chibnall to properly represent all these demographic groups, because people will be crushed if they don't see people with their exact characteristics on screen. I mean, I know I've been incredibly traumatized by not seeing Southern red-bearded Catholic mystery investigator apologists on screen for all these years who have dyslexia and need to watch their weight. And so, I totally get that. But Diane is in this category of, she's a representation character because she's only got one arm. So the typical narrative that you have with representation characters is you introduce them, you only let them be good.
Yeah.
They never get flaws like regular characters can. And you call massive amounts of attention to the fact that they are a representational character. And they don't do that last part with Diane.
Yeah.
They introduce her and they have her be only good. I mean, where did you train with the laser blaster? Well, it was a video game. And you've just solved the entire crisis and stuff like that. So, but they never make a big deal out of the fact she's only got an arm.
Right. They never mention it at all. Yeah.
Well, there's one kind of glancing reference to it where she's dug a hole in the ground in one of the virtual environments. And by the way, the virtual environments inside the passenger form are awesome. They are visually great. But she's dug a hole in the ground, and Vinder says, and it's not that big of a hole, but Vinder says, how long did that take? And she says, way too long.
Right.
And that's an allusion to the fact she had to do it one-handed. But, that's very minor. And so if you're going to have representational characters, do it like this, I mean, better yet, let them have flaws so you can tell actual stories with them, and not the kind of flaws of which, like they gave Yaz, of some kind of mental illness that needs constant reassurance.
Yeah.
Or what I mean, you can tell mental illness stories. There are loads of good mental illness stories to tell, but suffering from mental illness is not a character flaw. It's a character challenge.
Yeah.
And, but let him make mistakes and let him not be all that and a bag of chips. Let him be normal and don't constantly talk about it, I thought Claire was much better than what we would have gotten in a different season of Chris Chibnall's Doctor Who.
And certainly that whole storyline with Yaz, they didn't bring that up at all. And I think Yaz was much better this season.
Yes.
I mean, I want to talk about the season as a whole later, but we can talk about the characters. And I think Yaz was they didn't have to completely take away her desire to be Dr. Junior, because she kind of operates it, but it was much better done. Than last time.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only thing we did get in this episode, a line where when the doctor says, "How long has it been for you and Dan?" Yaz says, "It's been a few years," and the doctor is hurt by that, because she's failed them. She didn't get them quickly enough. And Dan takes the edge off it by saying, "Oh, we had an adventure. We went all over the world. She was amazing. She is so good. She was so amazing." And it's like, okay.
Then, help her, her hurt feelings.
Well, but thinking as it it's like, okay, I heard this at the finale of last season too.
Yeah.
And I could have stand to not hear it now. You could have just said, "Oh, we went all over the world. We had this amazing adventure. It was great." Yeah,
that is true. Yeah. That is true.
Now, one thing should mention is the reason why Dan and Yaz were able to get to 21st century Liverpool was through the tunnels, that there just happened to be a door that was the exact date and time they needed. Well, there had to be the one door that was marked December 5th, 2021.
Well, that was the date that they were looking for, because that's the date of the final Flux, right?
Yes. Right. But the idea is that the tunnels had the exact date they needed.
That's true. Well, yes.
That Williamson had already found the exact door they needed.
True.
So
that's true. The convenient plot device. So let's talk about the Grand Serpent, Prentice. When he's torturing the doctor, she describes his species as I didn't catch the whole thing, a binary species.
Binary demispecies with interbody bioprojection.
Which is very interesting. So
what that means is his species is basically Trill with a projectable strangly symbiont.
Right. Actually,
so basically take the Goa'uld and make it so that they can teleport themselves.
Oh, yeah. So like a mashup of the Trill and the Goa'uld.
Yeah.
That is kind of weird.
One thing I saw some fans saying is like, wait, Grand Serpent, we didn't get any explanation on him. Well, actually, we did. In the interrogation scene with the doctor deduces everything we basically need to know about the Grand Serpent. He doesn't confirm it, but it's clear from the scene that what she's guessing is correct. He's a member of some species that really has these two aspects, the human aspect and the serpent aspect, and he can project the serpent into people and strangle them. And so like binary is obvious. There's two of them. There's the serpent and there's the man. Demi means half or partial. So it's like a demi species would be individually, these binary things would be a half or partial species, but you put them together, you get a whole. It can bioproject between interbody bioprojection. Well, it can project the serpent, which is a biological entity, into other bodies. And she further deduces that his history, that he's a former dictator who is in exile. She also deduces his plan, which is to use the Centaurans to do the dirty work and then betray them or kill them, which to me is more like a subspecies of betrayal, and then rule over a semi-grateful humanity. So that's really all we need. I mean, you could attach names to it, like what's the name of his binary demi-species, but in terms of substance, she just told us what he is, where he's from, why he's here, and what he's planning to do.
And you get the sense that he did that to Vinder and Bell's people.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I'm not as hot on him as others might be. He almost felt to me like he was kind of a tag on to the whole story. That the story would have been just fine without him at all.
Right.
But that's just it was, and I don't know, maybe he has been exiled, as you mentioned at the beginning. And so maybe they're setting him up for one of the specials, that he's going to come back in one of the specials or something.
I'll be back.
I don't know, but it's just, I could have done without him at all as a whole. I mean, the whole unit subplot, although it was nice to see Kate Stewart literally going underground, and all that, but this whole story would have been fine without him, in my opinion.
I agree. He could have been excised from the story. I mean, he does play some functions, like he helps us understand Vinder's backstory. If Chris Chibnall were not leaving immediately, I mean, he could come back in a special, but I think it's somewhat doubtful, given what we know about the specials. I would think, oh, I'm just introducing a character for the future, for me to use in future seasons. And he may have had that intention for, well, I'm going to, introduce this villain. I have this interesting idea for a villain. I want to use it while I'm here. Someone else can pick it up after I'm gone.
Yeah.
Right. But I agree. They could have let the character breathe more. If we had another part to Flux and they took the moments, that running time, that extra hour, and filtered it back into the previous episode in small chunks that let things breathe and let us have more explanation and so forth, I think the overall 7-part Flux series might have been a bit more satisfying, even though it would have been slightly slower.
And that was kind of my thought too, is maybe if they had the extra 2 episodes they were supposed to have for this season, there might have been more there, and he's just kind of a tale that never got fully developed.
Right. That's true. What else? I want to mention that Time at the end, when Time personified confronts the Doctor, tells her that her end is coming. No regeneration, no life. Like, so this not like this regeneration is coming to an end, but your existence is coming to an end. Beware of the forces that mass against you and their master. Now, obviously, the Doctor's going to regenerate because we have we've been told that Russell T Davies is bringing in the 14th Doctor. But this is a big deal. This kind of reminds us of the 10th Doctor, that whole stuff where his end was predicted and all that. But this is the mention of the Master that we were talking about from before. So what do you think?
Well, also, I think the Master is going to be back. What Time said was, beware the forces that rally against you and their master. And the Doctor picked up on the significance of the word master. So there will be forces rallying against the Doctor. That may not be the cyber Time Lords. Right. Because, which I'm not really wild about the cyber Time Lords. I understand the idea, but I'm just not a huge fan of them. Also, it would immediately give it away that it's the Master if they're rallying against the Doctor. So, and they've already reintroduced the regular Cybermen, in this very special or series. So I don't know I guess we'll have to see what those forces are. I have some predictions for the specials, which we can get to at the end, but I didn't take, and I was alert to the possibility that you seem to be alluding to, Dom, that when Time says no regeneration, no life lasts forever, that Time was threatening the Doctor's life. But I don't think that's the case. I think life in this case is a synonym for a regeneration. Right. And so I think she was just saying this regeneration is ending. But she was unfriendly to the Doctor, which is interesting given that this is a time travel show. And she says, you won't outrun me. Right. Which is something that as a personification of time, well, nobody outruns time. Yeah. Except the Doctor. So, or anybody else with a TARDIS.
And I took the whole statement about no life, lasts forever, all life ends, that a statement that, yes, Doctor, even one day you will die and not regenerate sometime eventually, but that wouldn't be the no regeneration last. It was very much a statement, as much, breaking the fourth wall, of saying, yes, the 13th Doctor's regeneration will end here shortly. As much as. Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I was going to say that did the Timeless Child information establish that the Doctor is not a Gallifreyan by birth, is a different species, and therefore and is the one who brings regeneration to the Gallifreyans, to the Time Lords, and therefore maybe she has no limit to regeneration like the Time Lords do.
They've already established that she has no natural limit. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to double check that was established.
Whether she was apparently not born on Gallifrey. She may be a different species, or not, because there, Doctor Who science,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, she does not have a regeneration limit.
Okay. Just
at least not one that they've shown yet.
Right. I mean, they can do whatever they want.
and they need to not introduce one.
Yeah.
Because it was a mistake to introduce the regeneration limit to begin with. Because if the show survives, I mean, you're never going to have the Doctor just die.
Yeah.
If the show goes on, you'll always write some way out of that. And so you may as well not have it.
It has no drama left especially after the 11th Doctor's.
After the first time, yeah.
Yeah. So the only other things I wanted to mention, and I'll let you guys bring up anything I missed. The Doctor invites Dan to travel with them, and he accepts, which is nice. The Dan has proven himself to be a capable companion, to be quick on his feet, and mentally to be quick on things, and to have that expansiveness of mind to kind of grasp in the moment when things are going all nine ways sideways, that he kind of grasps things. And so that's good. I like Dan as a character. And then the Doctor apologizes to Yaz for not letting her in, for shutting her out from the problems that the Doctor had been about the Timeless Child stuff that she'd been dealing with at the end of last season, at the beginning of this season. And so we have a bit of a resolution of that. And
I like that when she apologized and said, I shouldn't have done that, Yaz stands up for herself and says, yeah, you shouldn't.
Yeah. Yes, that was good. So the only other, speaking of Dan, there was one thing where he fetched Carvanista, and which was nice.
I love that.
Fetch your dog. I did. That guru from the mountaintop was really smart. This was actually a big thing that I missed, that I just saw. Belle. She's got that little Tamagotchi thing that she's got with the little face on it.
It's a baby monitor.
Yeah, it's a communicator with her unborn child. I really liked that they brought in the fact that an unborn child is a person who can communicate. And
that's something I don't know that it's communicating with the unborn child. I think it's a complex prenatal baby monitor. Because the Doctor says, baby tech, and are you having and Belle says, let's not announce it.
Yeah.
And it does complex data functions that you wouldn't expect an unborn baby to do. But I did like that. And I was going to mention this. I did like, this is another example of how things have changed in society, because when Belle tells Vinder about the baby, she says, we're having a baby if the universe survives.
Yeah.
And that what's on the other side of that if could have been different in some ages of television. Like, if you want, or if we want to keep it, or something like that. Because in the past, when there was a push, especially in the United States here after Roe v. Wade in 1973, to normalize abortion in the media. And so you had TV shows like not just All in the Family, but in particular Maude, which was a spinoff of All in the Family that featured comedian B. Arthur as an extremely bad-tempered, sarcastic woman. She actually has an abortion on the show. I mean, they don't show it obviously, but they have an episode that's about she gets pregnant and she has an abortion. And this is, and for a long time in the 80s and 90s, here in U.S. television, there was a lot of dancing around it. If somebody gets pregnant, well, are we going to keep it or not? And these days, it's just assumed babies are a good thing. And that's great. And that's what we have here.
Yes, it was very nice. I like that acknowledgement. of that baby there. All right, so that is everything I had, all my notes. So, Father Cory, do you have any other notes that you want to mention?
Nothing really. Just kind of mention again, Kate Stewart told Osgood that she was going underground, and she literally did. She went into the Liverpool tunnels, and that was kind of fun scenes with her, especially when the doctor sees her, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Yes, Dan, TARDIS, Kate, other guy,
Victorian guy.
Victorian guy, yeah.
Hey, Jimmy.
So during this, we get to see images of like Liverpool under Centauran occupation, and we get to see businesses. And I can't help but noting, okay, could that be a real world business and stuff like that? And we like in this one scene, they're in a mall, and the signs say more dining on the terrace and stuff like that. But there's also a very clear, I don't know if it was product placement, but there was very clearly a corporate logo for something called Pull and Bear. Mm-hmm. And this will be very familiar to people in lots of parts of the world other than North America. We don't have Pull and Bear here. It turns out, I looked it up, Pull and Bear is like a trendy clothing place.
Okay.
And it's in South America, and it's in Europe, and it's in Asia, and it's in other places, but it's not in North America. So that would have been lost on us. In terms of other little things in the episode, how is sunlight getting to the surface of the Earth through the Lupari shield that is clearly shown as being solid and opaque, but has a brilliantly lit Earth underneath it? Doesn't make any sense. Also, Kate's iPhone can detect Artron energy. Mm-hmm. I guess they've got an app for that now. I didn't like the doctor's self-crush. I mean, we've had similar things with when doctors have met, but when this doctor meets herself, she's like got a crush on herself, or at least talks like that. She's self-flirting, and wasn't wild about that. The idea of when the doctors make telepathic contact and they say the word contact to initiate the connection, that actually goes back to Classic Who. I believe the first time that happened was in the 10th anniversary special, The Three Doctors.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Also, the Three Doctors introduced the antimatter universe where Omega is. And they talk about the antimatter in this episode coming from outside our universe. So that also chimes into stuff. In terms of antimatter, so okay. If you've got enough antimatter to destroy everything in our universe, throwing a couple of 3 armies at it will not stop that.
Yeah.
Also, now they kind of hint that the flux may not just be antimatter, but they say that's its principal component. But throwing matter at antimatter will stop it in mutual annihilation and this massive release of photons. So where's that happening?
Right.
That's that. So the science here is pretty wonky. But science fairy tale, blah, blah, blah. I was not kidding about most genocide-y doctor ever. Because Kate Stewart specifically asks the doctor once they've deduced what the Centauran plan is, should we warn the Daleks and the Centaurans to stop them? And that would have saved lots of Dalek and cyber lives. And the doctor says, my plan is more risky than that. And it turns out she has no plans to save the Daleks or the Cybermen. She is letting them be annihilated, and she annihilates the Centaurans too.
Yep.
So we have some serious, anger management issues here with the doctor. Kate says she hopes to meet this regeneration again. So that brings us to predictions for the specials.
Yes.
Kate's going to be back in the specials.
I would assume.
Also, we have to deal with the fact the TARDIS is broken. Mm-hmm. That has to be dealt with. And in some of the promotional art for the for the first of the specials, the Eve of the Daleks, it's got on some of the promotional art what looks like a broken TARDIS. So they may be dealing with that there. Something that needs to be explored in the future, but Russell T Davies could entirely drop, especially if it's not dealt with, is the war by Chibnall, is the war between space and time, because that really makes no sense. That's not something humans can comprehend. So I could easily see Chibnall not dealing with that anymore, and Russell T Davies choosing to just ignore it. But we will have in the specials, the January special, we're going to have Daleks. At the Easter special, we'll have Chinese pirates based on a historical representational lady Chinese pirate. And presumably some other villains, because pirates are, small potatoes and maybe not villains at all in Doctor Who, even though they're criminals. And then, of course, we're going to have the Master back for the regeneration. Mentioned we will have Kate Stewart, who really didn't do anything in this other than show up and talk about stuff. And we'll have, we've got to have resolution on Bell and Vinder's baby. So I expect Bell, Vinder, and Carvanista to show up again. And we may get another manifestation of time in the regeneration episode. So those are my thoughts.
And the Master, right? You mentioned the Master.
I mentioned the Master.
Yep. I think, we definitely have to have the Master one more time before the end of this regeneration of the Doctor. I'm going to guess it'll be the regeneration episode. I mean, it's the ultimate.
Yeah.
But we'll also see Dr. Ruth again.
I hope we get Dr. Ruth again. It is verified that the Master will be back for the regeneration episode. Okay. There have been photos from the set with people holding boxes of props that say Master props and things like that.
Sounds it.
By the way, if they do ever use the fob watch, the Doctor gets all her memories back. That actually, even though I'm not a fan of that, it could work in the series, because originally, like when we had William Hartnell and all the way up through Tom Baker, we didn't know how many regenerations the Doctor had previously. And the Doctor knew about them, presumably. Turns out not. But presumably, from an audience perspective, the Doctor knew about all these regenerations and it's okay for the Doctor to know the answers to mysteries that the audience doesn't know the answers to. So if they give the Doctor back the mysteries, they should only give the memories. They should only give the audience little tastes of what's in there. And we should never have a thorough exploration of all of it. It should emerge a piece at a time and allow the Doctor to be mysterious in a way the Doctor's past was mysterious between regenerations 1 and 4.
And I wonder if the fob watch will come back as part of the regeneration.
It may,
maybe not leading to it, but it'll lead to the event that leads to the regeneration, basically. That's the Doctor some reason will be in such crisis or trouble that gets the watch back from the TARDIS, gets the memories back, solves the problem, and then off to regeneration. Something like that. I'm obviously they've got their plans, but something along that lines.
I'd love to hear what listeners think. What do you all think the specials will entail? What we'll see, if you agree with our predictions, or if you have some interesting ideas of your own, or things you'd like to see. I'd love to hear that.
One thing I'd like to kind of mention too, the Vinder and Bell's child. I hope we see that resolved, and I'm hoping it's not going to be the Doctor. I'm hoping it's not going to be this. We're going to throw him through a wormhole and becomes the Doctor.
Yeah,
I'm kind of hoping that doesn't happen. That it just becomes a child.
Right.
Just it's been resolved. Great. Yes. Yay. Healthy child. We're done.
And leave the Doctor's origins mysterious.
Given how important, the child has to be important to justify its inclusion in the story and the amount of prominence it's been given. I'm okay with it being the Doctor. I'm also okay with it not being the Doctor, as long as they explain why it's significant, because you don't have this. From a writing perspective, you don't introduce this pregnant character and have this mystery hunt for getting the parents back together and, we're having a baby, and there's too much buildup here for it to just be an ordinary baby.
What if the baby's not the doctor, but the master?
Well, that would be interesting. It would be hard to explain given that the parents appear to be not non-Gallifreyans.
Yeah.
Right.
But maybe what if the master has an origin as mysterious as the doctor's in that sense?
I don't know. There's part of me just like, does it really need to be?
Yeah.
And don't discount the ability of them to take perfectly reasonable writing cues and throw them away. So,
I mean, maybe the babies was there to increase the drama of Belle looking for Vinder, the mother looking for the father of her child.
That's one thing I was thinking too.
Didn't stop Belle from being an action hero in the middle of a pregnancy.
No, got to give it a credit to Belle. Yeah, really. All right, I think that should do it. Unless there's anything left, I think we've thoroughly discussed this. Overall, impressions of the season.
I thought this was probably one of the best seasons of New Who. Very simply. I mean, this was very well done. I loved the serial format. Again, as I said at the beginning, it felt like classic Who with the serials. There was a lot of confusion to it, and we've said it time and time again. This should have been an 8-part series. It wasn't. It was only 6-part, and so there's some confusion added there. But by and large, I thought this was a fantastic season. I really enjoyed it. This is one I'll probably watch again. I probably want to do a binge watch at some point to watch all the episodes in one, and
that'd be fun.
Very much worth doing. So this was fantastic.
Jimmy, your impression?
I don't know if I would say it's the best season of New Who, but it's certainly one of the best, and one of the best in a long time. I don't think certainly none of the previous Jodie Whittaker seasons have been this good. I don't think any of the Peter Capaldi seasons were this good. It would have to be back in, and certainly the first season was not this good with Christopher Eccleston. If there was a season this good, it would have to be in one of the earlier, better seasons of Matt Smith, or one of the later, better seasons of David Tennant, like maybe the Donna season. Yeah. But even that one is marred by the horrible ending. Where the Dr. Donna character is not a success in my mind. There's all kinds of stuff wrong in that story, and not just with the Dr. Donna. So this, I have to think about it. I would need to watch it again, and I'm willing to watch it again in a way that I'm not interested in watching other Jodie Whittaker Doctor Who. I haven't, except for the requirements of doing this podcast. I don't know that I've viewed Jodie Whittaker episodes more than once. I mean, I may have to clarify points or something, but because BBC sound is so terrible. But yeah, this is real. If Chris Chibnall had done this kind of stuff from the beginning, his tenure as a showrunner on Doctor Who would be much less controversial, much more fondly remembered in its wake.
For me, Jodie Whittaker, the 13th Doctor, is still not my favorite Doctor. Yeah, ranks below all of the other New Who Doctors, frankly, and a lot of the old classic Who Doctors. But this season was great. It was great. I'm trying to think of what there was some Capaldi seasons stuff I liked, but as a whole, I think maybe as a story, I think I have to approach this as a story as opposed to like other stories from previous seasons, as opposed to the whole season. It really ranks up there, but there are other stories that I liked better. But this was the season we all wanted from Chris Chibnall. Like you said, from the beginning, this is what we should have had. I'm sorry that Graham didn't get to have this season. Because he's still, I think, ranks as my favorite 13th Doctor companion. But it was a surprisingly good season, and I'm looking forward to a good run out of the specials to the regeneration, and hopefully we get that. Hopefully it continues that way. Interesting coincidence, by the way. The director of this episode, his name was, or her, I'm not sure if it's a man or woman, Azure Salim. Coincidence? I don't know. Spelled differently, Azhur as opposed to Azure, but I don't know. Just thought I'd mention that.
By the way, it is a he. So
okay.
Yes.
I wasn't sure about the cultural name. All right. I think that should about do it for us. We do want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Secrets of Doctor Who, including Judson G, Michael G, Colin M, Donald Y, and Shelley W. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that is it from us. What did you think of The Vanquishers? This is Chapter 6 of the whole season, of the 13th Doctor, anything we talked about. Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. We'll be back next week, when we'll be discussing the 4th Doctor story, The Seeds of Doom. And then later on, after New Year's, we'll be discussing the Eve of the Daleks 13th Doctor special. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Tom.
Father Cory Sticha, thank you as well.
Thank you, Tom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, I am Professor Eustacio Jericho, Scourge of Scoundrels.